China's economic slowdown has lately become a worry for financial markets and business people all over the world. What's worrying is the simultaneous fall of both growth and inflation in China. China's GDP growth, which was cruising at about 6 to 7.8% from 2013 to 2019, slowed to just 3% in 2022, despite the post-COVID opening up and the accompanying revenge buying. Even in 2023, GDP will probably rise to just 4.7%. Now, what is worrying economists even more is the slow growth is being accompanied by prices falling to the point of deflation. In every month of 2023, inflation has been below 1%. In fact, CPI inflation fell to 0 in June and then to minus 0.3 in July. Now, Morgan Stanley says the Chinese economy could be getting into a sustained GDP slowdown because of three simultaneous problems: demography, deflation, and debt. Demography, its population has plateaued and its working age population is falling, which means higher wages and possibly slower growth. The next D, that is deflation or falling prices, as we just saw, a minus 0.3% inflation in July 2023. Now, many economists say China could be falling into a debt deflation loop. Let's understand this a little better. China's debt to GDP has risen sharply to 300% of GDP in 2023. Most of this debt is with local government financing vehicles and with property developers. In China, both these categories are very huge. Property sector plus local government financing vehicles account for 70% of the GDP, according to a Morgan Stanley report. Now, we need to understand the role of local governments in China. After 2008 global financial crisis, China tried to move away from export-led growth to local infrastructure-led growth. Here, local governments became important. From 2008 to up to 2020, local governments financing vehicles were lending to infrastructure contractors and to property developers. The local governments have a lot of landed assets, and if there was a funding mismatch or a default, the LGFVs sold more land to property developers and refinanced the loans. The pandemic started a decline in property prices. This was compounded by the Chinese government's severe clampdown on e-commerce giants and digital education companies, basically the private sector. Geopolitics also changed, and post-COVID, Western multinational companies became wary of too much dependence on China. Multinationals pulled out a part of their production and relocated to either the home country or to other cheap labor countries like Vietnam, Philippines, India, Indonesia, Malaysia. Together, these led to job cuts and fall in demand for houses in China. As a result, property developers defaulted to the LGFVs, and the LGFVs in turn stopped refinancing the property guys or stopped fresh lending, since their assets, that is land, wasn't fetching much due to the fall in land prices. China is now in the throes of a classic debt deflation loop. LGFVs and property companies are selling to deleverage and pulling down prices and growth even lower. Morgan Stanley's economist Chetan Nahiya writes, the answer does not lie in less government spending, but in more. The central government, which is less leveraged, must swap its own long-term debt with the short-term debts of the LGFVs. Central government must also transfer quality assets to local governments. As these units spend, the economy will start reflating, recovering, and then growing. In short, a mix of monetary and fiscal stimuluses can reflate the economy. Else, China could fall into a debt deflation loop. That is, local government vehicles not lending, companies not investing, hence jobs falling, and even less money with local governments to invest.